Hello, this is Professor Harper, and this is a lecture for journalism and the law. I thought I would take you through a way to read the actual decisions. Sometimes it can be a little daunting because it's written in legal language, but let me try to break it down for you. So here is a U.S. Supreme Court decision, the Federal Communications Commission versus Pacifica Foundation. Here is the volume, and this means that it is a U.S. Supreme Court decision. This is the page number where it starts, and this is the year in which it was decided. Now, I am just using lawjusticia.com, and so you'll see some useful information here. So again, it talks about what the actual citation is. Here are the parties involved. Sometimes it can be more than two. And here is what's called the docket number. And you'll see these on almost all court cases, state and local. And what the docket number is that it's a tracking system for that specific court. So, they're not going to go by a citation if it hasn't been decided. And so this is the way that it kind of sits in a pattern of how to locate it. It was argued over 2 days, and it was decided um, just toward the end of the term in 1978. So oftentimes what you'll have is it's argued, several months will go by. And certiorari is which allows a case to go forward. So the U.S. Court of Appeals only hears a certain percentage of cases, and the U.S. Supreme Court hears a certain number of cases. So in this case, it went from the U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. It then was granted cert to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and then it made its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the justices decided that they wanted to hear it. Okay. Now, here is a syllabus. This will generally be where you get the facts of a case from. So here it describes how Pacifica Foundation, which is referred to as the respondent or the defendant here, broadcast a monologue by George Carlin entitled Filthy Words. And it went through the various dirty words that were um, uh, used at that time, still used today. And so George Carlin did this as it was a provocative thing that he really wanted the case to come to the courts. And what happened is that a father was driving with his young son, and he complained to the FCC that this type of language was indecent and should not be used. So what happened here is that the decision was that the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court was that the judgment was reversed from the decision that the U.S. Court of Appeals made, which essentially said it was legal and protected by the First Amendment for George Carlin to say these things over the radio. Okay? The U.S. Supreme Court said, no, it's not. And so therefore, we have a very important decision which allows the Federal Communications Commission to essentially censor language on the radio. So you'll find here that this is the author of the majority opinion, okay? And Justice Stevens is the one that wrote it, okay? Now, this goes through a variety of parts to that decision, okay? And here's where you have who lined up with what, okay? This can be a little complicated. This is a complicated decision, okay? So Justice Stevens wrote the majority opinion, and he delivered the opinion of the court, okay? And Chief Justice Berger, Justice Rehnquist, okay, and then joined by Blackmun and Powell, basically said, we think that indecent language should not be used on the radio. So there are 5 votes that joined in this decision, so therefore a majority. Okay? Now here you have, and these are called concurring opinions. There's the majority, then in this case there were concurring opinions. And what a concurring opinion is that it basically says the justice wants to make his or her own points about why he or she believes this. Okay? Now, Justice Brennan filed a dissenting opinion. Okay? He did not vote for in the majority, and he was joined by Justices Marshall, Stewart, and White. So therefore, 4 justices joined this dissent, and also Justice Stewart wrote a separate dissenting opinion. Okay, so as you go through here, there are 5 in favor of the decision and 4 opposed to it. Now, if you really get confused here, all right, go to Wikipedia, look up the decision, and it will give you a short synopsis of what the decision was and who joined whom. Okay, I'm not endorsing Wikipedia for all things, but sometimes it's useful. Okay, now here is what the issue is. Okay, the case requires that we decide whether the Federal Communications Commission has any power to regulate a radio broadcast that is indecent but not obscene. Okay, right? So the issue is posed in a question: does the Federal Communication Commission have any power to regulate a radio broadcast that is indecent? And the answer is yes, it does. Now, here is additional information that goes in terms of the facts of the case, okay? So that you will see a lot of detail about this, okay? And then you can see what actions occurred before this, okay? So that the U.S. District Court of Appeals essentially said that what Carlin did was okay, okay? But the U.S. Supreme Court reversed that, okay, and said it was not okay, and that remains the law of the land today. Now, here are various things about the statute. Whenever you see something like this, okay, this means the United States Code, and this is something that designates that, and this is the number of that specific code. Okay. Apparently my dog doesn't like me doing this, and that's why he's barking. I apologize for that. Okay, so that here are some of the precedents that are used. Okay, this has to do with obscenity. Okay, and it will go through the various precedents that are used to provide the foundation for why the court ruled the way that it did. Okay, all right. So here's some useful and interesting information about what the reasoning is. Okay, and it's important to go through this and see how the decision was made. Okay, and then finally it gets to the end and says the judgment of the Court of Appeals is reversed. Okay, and here is an appendix to the opinion of the court, which actually gives the verbatim 12-minute monologue that George Carlin made. Okay, so it's not difficult, not brain surgery, but what you're reading here is a little bit different from what you've seen in terms of reading other documents. So I wanted to give you an example of how to look at a case, how to read it, and hopefully translate this into an abstract and then later on an impact analysis. And there's a separate video on those 2 issues. So thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you online.